So have you ever been fitted for driver before, and during the fitting process you've hit so many high quality shots, long, straight, good launch, perfect spin, that you excitedly get to the shop, you place an order for yours, and when it arrives, you take it away, but then the drives are nothing like you saw in the fitting? Well, if so, I'm going to show you that potentially how one little change, and maybe you not getting the whole picture in the fitting, could make you believe that the two drivers are completely different. So if you're still watching, potentially how I've opened that video could be true for you. That you've hit a driver in the fitting and had some amazing results. But then when you get yours and you practice or play, you don't see the numbers, and with numbers about the ball being so readily available with things like Top Tracer nowadays, you get to see that maybe your launch angle and spin numbers are completely different from your fitting, and as a result, you're not optimizing those drives. So I'm going to hit a couple of shots, because we saw my first one there. Even though my club head speed is not as quick as it has been, my launch conditions were really good. Around that 12, 11.5 degree launch, 2,500 spin. So I'm going to swing the club pretty similar for 2 or 3 drives. I'm going to look at some numbers, some distances, and I'm going to talk about that if you don't understand this bit, you will see a massively difference in performance for your driver. So let's go next one. Okay, so that one launched much, much higher. Still very, very good drive. Still hit up. My spin's gone down. And if anything, that one's actually gone a little bit further. Again, nice and accurate, but launching completely different at 8.8 degrees. Still hit up, but my spin suddenly jumped to 3,200. Carry all the way down at 235 and total at 256. So again, launch angle pretty decent. I've been a little bit quicker on that one. So low point behind, so still hit up. But spin rates really, really jumped up to, again, 3,200, 260 carry and 275 total. Now, even though those were all very good results, we saw very, very different launch angles and spin rates, even though I've hit those with the exact same driver. And we saw some massively different differences in distances, even though I got more in play. So let's look at that one thing that has affected those numbers. Okay, so we can see my first shot there was fairly central, but a little bit low on the face, producing 11.5 degree launch angle, 2,500 spin. Second strike was out of the toe, a little bit higher up the club face. That one launched at 14.5 and spin came down to 2,400. The least well performing one, I'm sure you can guess why. Strike very low off the club face, 9 degree launch and 3,156 backspin, but a massive loss in distance. And then the final one, still a bit low on the face, but out the toe, still launching higher, but still lots and lots of backspin. So the biggest change in those shots was actually the impact location on the face. So my current driver, Titleist TSR2, have been fitted, but I needed to understand when I was getting fitted, whereabouts I was hitting the ball on the face. Because as a general rule with drivers, and they're not all exactly the same, whatever the loft says on the head, so mine's actually at 8.25 degrees, is actually in the middle of the club face, right flush in the middle. As you go an inch down the face, there's 5.2 degrees less loft, an inch up the face, 5.2 degrees more loft. Now, when you get one out the toe, the ball tends to want to turn over from right to left, heel, left to right for the fade. So you can see, and also lower on the face, even though there's less loft, will produce more backspin, higher on the face, less backspin. So you can see if that strike pattern moves around in your swing, you're going to launch the ball differently. You're going to spin the ball differently, and you're going to see very, very different shape of shots. So I get lots of golfers tell me, you know, it's all the driver's fault. And it's lovely, isn't it, being able to blame that? But it's ultimately you. So If when you've been fitted, you've not been aware of where you've been hitting the ball, let's say for argument's sake, in the fitting, you've been a little bit high and a little bit out the toe, that'll have been launching high, low spin, probably hitting some lovely long shots. But when you play, you're hitting the ball low heel. The ball's going to launch lower, spin more, shape differently, and you're not going to feel like you've done a lot different. So I think if it's toe and heel strikes, for a lot of guys, that can be distance from the golf ball. So play around with that if that's the case. Be a bit closer. If you can't monitor strike with something like TrackMan, like I've got, spray the face, put impact tape on the face. Anything on the club face will slightly manipulate spin numbers, probably lower those down a little bit, but monitor that. So distance from the ball, or feel that you're either swinging the hands out a little bit more or a little bit closer to you. Now for me, what we tend to see is my miss is always a little bit towards the toe if anything, and generally a bit low on the club face. And that's because when I swing, I get the low point behind the golf ball, which is great, so the club's traveling up into the ball. Now the only problem is when I get that lowest point too far away from the ground, by the club gets to the ball, it's too high, and that's where I get it a little bit low in the face. So I'm not going to talk about everybody's different strikes, but definitely for me, I almost want to feel that on my practice swing, I actually even might touch the ground back behind. When I swing, I don't want to. The ball's up in the air, and I want that ability to get the club traveling up through the ball, but be a bit more centered with the strike. So a little practice swing. I actually feel like I touch the ground. Did that a lot as a kid and almost drop kicked some very good drives. But try and get my low point behind, but closer to the ground. Get that strike better. And when I can be a little bit closer to what I want, we start seeing some good numbers. So fairly near the middle of the club face, travelled up. So we can see on Optimizer there, 12.5 degree launch angle, absolutely perfect in the blue. 2,300 spin right in the bottom edge, but absolutely ideal of what it should be. 92 feet peak height, and everything being absolutely optimal. Now, obviously I've been fitted for this, but it's really, really important to understand that if my strike is generally a little bit off, I won't get quite into my optimum numbers. And as good as the modern drivers are for keeping ball speed up, launch angle and spin rates change relative to strike. So if you've been fitted, and in the fitting you thought it was the best driver you've ever tried, but when you get it back, it's not working, it's not behaving, maybe, just maybe, it's not the club. Maybe it's the fact that you're hitting it a little differently on the club face. But if you haven't known that in the fitting, it's very difficult. You've not had the full picture. So I know if I strike it well with driver, I'm going to be about as optimum as I can for my club head speed. Now, if I then want to hit the ball further, I need to try and get a little bit more speed in there and maintain that strike. And if I can get there, put a good swing on it. Now that one didn't feel as good. We can see a little bit out the toe. So the ball's launched a little bit higher, spun a little bit less, 258 carry and 289 total. So I love the consistency the new driver gives me, but I'm fully aware that some of my drives will perform very differently if I can't control that strike. And if you know it and can improve it, that's where your driver is going to perform just like it did in your fitting.